The day I was sold began with a sound of silver. 30 pieces counted twice, each clink against the mahogany table marking another second of my stepmother's satisfaction. Outside, storm clouds gathered over our estate like vultures. The sky had turned the color of old bruises, and I wondered if the heavens themselves were mourning what was about to happen. My 18th winter. My Omega presentation. My execution. Nova, hold still. Evangeline's voice was silk wrapped around iron as she fastened the collar around my throat. Not a necklace. A collar, black leather embedded with silver clasps that marked me as property in transit. Her manicured nails scraped against my skin, tucking my dark hair behind my ears with the kind of care a hunter might show while dressing their kill. You look almost worth the price he paid. The cloak they'd given me for the journey hung from my shoulders like a burial shroud. It had belonged to my mother once, before the fever took her 6 years ago. Before my father's grief drove him to remarry. Before he too followed her into death, leaving me in the hands of a woman who counted my heartbeats in terms of profit and revenge. My fingers found the small Omega medallion hidden beneath the collar. My mother's, passed down through 3 generations of our bloodline. The metal was warm against my palm, worn smooth by decades of anxious touches just like this one. Omegas are not weak because we feel deeply, she'd whispered during my last fever, her hand cool against my burning forehead. We are strong because we survive what would shatter others, and still we do not break. In the darkened window glass, a stranger stared back at me, olive skin gone pale with fear, dark eyes too large and wild for my face, like a trapped animal's. Hair the color of midnight, now marked with that damning collar. I looked exactly like what I was. Merchandise awaiting delivery. Remember what we discussed, Evangeline said, her voice dropping to a murmur so soft that her daughter, my stepsister Celeste, wouldn't hear from where she preened in the drawing room. You will marry King Matteo. You will be the dutiful Omega wife to the crippled Alpha. And you will ensure his continued patronage of this family. Her smile was a knife in the dark. This is payment for what your mother took from me. Consider it her debt, finally settled. For what my mother took from her. The words had haunted me for years, though Evangeline never explained. Some old slight. Some ancient wound that festered. And now I was the coin that would pay for it. Celeste laughed from the other room, the sound like crystal bells, perfect and untouchable. The golden daughter with her rare alpha presentation and calculating amber eyes. The daughter who should have been offered to the fearsome king instead. But Evangeline needed Celeste for greater ambitions. A duke's son, perhaps, or a council seat. I was expendable. Worse, I was useful. The door opened, and cold air rushed in carrying the scent of rain and steel. A man stepped through, tall and imposing, his presence filling the foyer like gathering smoke. He wore the king's colors, deep crimson and black, and his eyes were the color of winter itself, gray and merciless. Beta Adrian, Evangeline purred, suddenly all deference and simpering grace. Right on time. As you can see, she's prepared for transport. Transport. Not travel. Not journey. Transport. Like livestock. Like cargo. Adrian's gaze moved over me with the efficiency of a military assessment, taking in the collar, the cloak, my trembling hands. Something flickered in his expression, pity? Disgust. Before his face returned to stone. The king's carriage is ready. We leave immediately. Wait. The word escaped before I could stop it, small and broken. Evangeline's hand closed around my upper arm, nails digging in hard enough to bruise. She leaned close, her breath hot against my ear. This is what you're worth, Nova. 30 pieces of silver and the king's mercy toward this household. You should be grateful. She shoved me forward, and I stumbled into Adrian's shadow. She's yours now. The contract is signed. Adrian caught my elbow, steadying me with surprising gentleness before his grip turned firm and impersonal. Professional. He was collecting a package, nothing more. As he guided me toward the door, I looked back once. Evangeline stood in the candlelight, counting her silver with long, elegant fingers. Celeste had appeared in the doorway, watching me leave with the faint smile of someone watching a rival being removed from the board. The rain hit my face the moment we stepped outside, cold and sharp as tiny knives. Through the downpour I could see it, the king's carriage, black as a hearse, drawn by 4 massive horses whose breath steamed in the freezing air. The royal crest gleamed on the door, a wolf crowned and snarling. "Inside," Adrian said quietly, opening the carriage door. I climbed in on shaking legs. The interior smelled of leather and something else, something sharp and medicinal that made my omega instincts prickle with warning. The door closed behind me with a sound like a tomb ceiling. As the carriage lurched into motion, I pressed my face to the rain-streaked window, watching my childhood home disappear into the storm. The silver collar felt tight around my throat. My mother's medallion burned against my skin beneath it, warm and steady. We survive what would shatter others. I closed my eyes and tried to believe it. The journey took 3 hours through worsening weather, and with every mile, the stories I'd heard about King Matteo grew louder in my mind. The alpha who could not walk. The warrior brought low by battle. Or was it a curse? The tales varied. Some said an enemy blade had severed his spine. Others whispered of dark magic, a rival's hex that stole his legs but left him alive to suffer. All agreed on one thing. He was fearsome, brutal. A king who ruled through fear and the iron will of his beta and the cold brilliance of his physician, Victor. A king who had burned through 3 arranged betrothals, each omega fleeing before the wedding could take place. Until Evangeline had offered me up. Until she'd negotiated a price for damaged goods. An omega with no prospects, no connections, no way to refuse. The carriage finally slowed, and I forced myself to look out the window. The palace rose from the mountainside like a fortress of old nightmares. Black stone and iron. Towers that pierced the storm clouds. Walls that could withstand siege warfare. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a prison. As we passed through the gates, I caught my first glimpse of him. Even from a distance, even through rain and failing light, I saw him on the covered terrace overlooking the courtyard. The white hair was unmistakable, long and pale as moonlight. His frame was powerful, shoulders broad, arms strong from whatever exercises kept his upper body battle-ready. But he was seated, not on a throne, on a chair with wheels. Alpha King Matteo. The man I'd been sold to. The man I would marry. He turned his head, and even across the distance, I felt the weight of his gaze. It was the look of a predator measuring prey. The look of a man who had learned to see everything as either weapon or weakness. The carriage stopped. Adrian opened the door. Rain poured in. "Welcome," Adrian said without inflection, "to your new home." I stepped out into the storm, my mother's medallion cold against my heart, and met the eyes of the disabled Alpha King. This was where my mother's words would be tested. This was where I would learn if I could bend without breaking. Or if I would shatter like all the others before me. They didn't take me to quarters to rest. They didn't offer food or warmth or even a moment to gather myself. Adrian's hand remained firm on my elbow as he steered me through corridors of black stone, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence. Every torch we passed cast shadows that seemed to reach for me like grasping hands. "He's waiting," was all Adrian said. His voice flat as cemetery ground. My heart hammered against my ribs. The collar felt tighter with each step, the silver clasps cold against my throat. Water dripped from my cloak, leaving a trail behind us like breadcrumbs I could never follow home. Not that there was a home to return to. Only Evangeline's satisfied smile and the memory of silver coins changing hands. The throne room doors loomed ahead, twice the height of a man and carved with wolves in mid-hunt. Adrian pushed them open without ceremony, and the hinges groaned like something dying. The room beyond stole the breath from my lungs. It was vast and brutal in its architecture. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Pillars of dark granite lined the space like giant sentinels. At the far end, elevated on a dais of 3 steps that might as well have been a mountain, sat the throne. Not gold or jeweled like the stories told of southern kings. This was iron and stone, built for war, not comfort. And before it, in a chair of leather and dark wood and wheels that gleamed like weapons, sat Alpha King Matteo. The white hair I'd glimpsed from the courtyard was longer up close, falling past his shoulders in a silver cascade that caught the torchlight. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, dangerous and deliberate. Scars traced his left cheekbone and disappeared into his collar. His eyes were pale, somewhere between gray and ice blue, and they fixed on me with the intensity of a wolf selecting which deer would fall. He wore black, all black, fitted to emphasize the powerful breadth of his shoulders and arms. His hands rested on the wheels of his chair, and I could see the calluses there, the evidence of a man who had learned to move himself through sheer strength of will. His legs, covered in dark leather, remained motionless. "So," he said, and his voice was exactly what I'd feared. Deep and cold and absolute, the kind of voice that expected obedience the way gravity expected falling. "This is what 30 pieces of silver buys." Flinch. Adrian's hand on my arm tightened in warning. Matteo's gaze raked over me from head to toe, clinical and dismissive. "Remove the cloak." My fingers fumbled with the clasp. The heavy fabric fell to the stone floor with a wet slap, leaving me in the simple gray dress beneath, soaked through and clinging to my frame. I felt naked under his assessment. Suppose. My omega instincts screamed at me to lower my eyes, to submit, to make myself small before this apex predator. But something, pride maybe, or the last ember of my mother's voice, made me meet his gaze. His eyebrow lifted slightly. Surprise. Annoyance. I couldn't tell. "She has some fire," came a new voice, smooth and clinical. A man emerged from the shadows beside the throne, tall and lean with dark hair pulled back severely. He wore deep blue robes that marked him as educated, perhaps scholarly. Wire-rimmed spectacles caught the light as he studied me like I was a specimen under glass. Uncommon for one so obviously terrified. Her heart rate is elevated. I can hear it from here. "Victor." Adrian's acknowledgement was terse. So this was the physician. The third point in the triangle of power that ruled this fortress. His gaze felt different from the king's. Less predatory, more analytical. Somehow that was worse. "Come closer," Matteo commanded. My feet moved before my mind could catch up, carrying me across the expanse of stone until I stood at the base of the dais. 3 steps. Just 3 steps separated us, but they might as well have been an ocean. I could smell him from here. Pine and steel and something darker. Something that made my omega biology respond with a confusing mix of fear and recognition. Alpha. Powerful alpha. Dangerous alpha. "Your stepmother," he said, leaning forward slightly in his chair, "was very eager to be rid of you. She cited family debts, political necessity, a desire to secure my goodwill." His lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was the baring of teeth. What she didn't mention was whether you came willingly. The question hung in the air like a blade. I swallowed hard, tasting rain and fear. Would it matter? Victor made a small sound, surprise or amusement I couldn't tell. Adrian's presence behind me went very still. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those pale eyes. "No," he said quietly, and somehow the softness was more terrifying than shouting would have been. "No, I suppose it wouldn't. Or here. The contract is signed. Your stepmother has her silver and her political favor. And I have." He paused, his gaze dropping to the collar around my throat, then back to my face. "I have what I purchased. An omega. Bride. A solution to the council's incessant demands that I produce an heir." The words landed like blows. I wasn't a person to him. I was a function. Tool. Just as I'd been to Evangeline. "Strip her," Matteo said to Victor, his tone suggesting he was discussing the weather. "Check for disease or defect. I want a full physical assessment by morning. Adrian, assign quarters in the East Wing." Not the royal chambers. Somewhere she can be monitored. No. The word escaped before I could stop it, sharp and desperate. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Matteo went very still. When he spoke, his voice was soft as silk drawn across a throat. What did you say? Every instinct screamed at me to back down, to apologize, to submit. But I'd already been sold. Already been collared and transported like livestock. Already been reduced to a price and a transaction. I had nothing left to lose except the last shred of my dignity. I said no. My voice shook, but I kept it steady enough. I'll submit to your physician's examination with a female attendant present. Not stripped like an animal at auction. I may be property now, but I was raised with some dignity. Victor's eyes widened behind his spectacles. Adrian's hand moved to his weapon, though he didn't draw it. The silence stretched so long I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then Matteo laughed. It was a harsh sound, rusty with disuse, and it held no warmth whatsoever. But it was genuine. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with something that might have been respect or might have been the consideration a chess player gives an unexpectedly clever move from a pawn. Adrian, he said, not taking his eyes off me. What were the other three like? The ones before her. They wept, Adrian replied quietly. Begged. One fainted. Another tried to run. And this one argues contract terms. Matteo's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Interesting. He rolled his chair forward slightly, and I fought every instinct not to step back. Very well, Omega. Victor will conduct his examination with a female attendant. You'll have your dignity. For now. He paused, his gaze dropping again to the collar. But understand this, you are mine. Bought and paid for. You'll live where I dictate. Eat when I allow it. Sleep under guard. You'll marry me when I choose. Bed me when I require it. And produce the heir my counsel demands. Those are the terms. Your stepmother's revenge and my political necessity. Do you understand? Each word was a nail in a coffin. I understood perfectly. I was a broodmare. Vessel. A solution to his problems and Evangeline's vendetta. I understand, I whispered, and hated how my voice broke on the words. Good. He turned his chair away from me, a dismissal as clear as a slammed door. Adrian, take her to the East Wing. Victor, conduct your assessment tonight. I want the results on my desk by dawn. He paused, his back to me. And Omega, welcome to your new home. Try not to disappoint me too quickly. Adrian's hand closed around my arm again, already pulling me away. I glanced back once as the throne room doors began to close. Matteo sat before his iron throne, alone in that vast cold space. His white hair gleaming in the torchlight and his powerful frame trapped in that chair of wheels and leather. For just a moment, I saw past the cruel king to something else. Something isolated and bitter and angry at the world. Then the doors closed and he was gone. This way, Adrian said, his voice carefully neutral. It's a long walk to the East Wing. As we moved through the dark corridors, I touched my mother's medallion beneath the collar. The metal was warm, live. I was trapped in a fortress with a king who saw me as property, a physician who saw me as a specimen, and a beta who saw me as a duty. I'd been sold, collared, and claimed. But I hadn't broken yet. Not yet. The East Wing was a prison dressed in finery. My room was large enough to echo, with a four-poster bed that could have slept five and windows that overlooked nothing but the sheer cliff face and churning gray sea beyond. Beautiful and isolating in equal measure. A gilded cage with a lock on the outside. Victor's examination had been thorough and humiliating despite the presence of a stone-faced female attendant named Helena. He'd measured and prodded and taken samples of my blood, all while making clinical observations in that smooth, detached voice. Healthy omega biology. No signs of disease or prior trauma. Suitable for breeding purposes. As if I were a mare being evaluated for stud. The report went to Matteo at dawn as ordered. By midday, my new routine had been established. I was not permitted to leave the East Wing without Adrian as escort. I was not permitted to speak to palace staff beyond necessary requests. I was not permitted in the throne room, the war room, the council chambers, or any space where the king conducted business. My meals arrived on trays, already selected, already portioned. Even my clothing had been chosen for me. Simple dresses in gray and dark blue, nothing decorative, nothing personal. I was a kept thing. A future bride locked away until needed. 3 days passed in suffocating monotony. 3 days of staring at gray walls and grayer seas. 3 days of Helena's silent presence as she stood guard, her hand never far from the dagger at her belt. 3 days of feeling my mind begin to fray at the edges from lack of purpose, lack of connection, lack of anything resembling life. On the 4th morning I heard him. The sound came from down the corridor. A crash, then cursing in a voice I recognized. 2. I moved to my door and pressed my ear against the wood. Helena had stepped away, probably to fetch my breakfast. For once I was alone. Another crash. The sound of something shattering. More cursing, raw and frustrated. My hand moved to the door handle before I could think better of it. Locked, of course. But the mechanism was simple, old-fashioned. I'd watched Helena work it enough times. A hairpin from the vanity, a bit of pressure in the right place, and click. The door swung open and I was free. Or at least free enough to make a terrible decision. I followed the sounds down the corridor, my bare feet silent on the cold stone. The cursing was coming from behind a set of double doors, one of which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see a slice of the room within, a private study perhaps or a war room, maps on the walls, a massive desk covered in documents, and Matteo, his chair positioned before a table laden with reports, one arm sweeping across its surface to send papers flying in a cascade of white. His face was twisted with frustration, his pale eyes blazing with an anger that seemed directed entirely at himself. Useless, he snarled at the empty room. Utterly goddamn useless. I should have left. Should have crept back to my room before Helena returned. But something in his voice stopped me. Something beyond anger. Despair, maybe. The kind of pain that came from being trapped inside your own body. I pushed the door open wider. He spun his chair toward the sound with shocking speed, his hand already moving to the dagger at his belt. When he saw me, his expression went from deadly to thunderous. What are you doing here? Where's your guard? Gone to fetch breakfast. I stayed in the doorway, ready to flee if necessary. I heard you. Thought. I don't know what I thought. You thought you'd spy on the crippled king. His voice was acid. See how the mighty have fallen. Perhaps take notes to share with your stepmother. I thought you might need help. The words hung between us. His hand remained on his dagger, but confusion flickered across his features. Help, he repeated, the word strange in his mouth. From my captive Omega. The woman I purchased like livestock. The woman who has nothing else to do. I gestured at the chaos of papers scattered across the floor. You're right-handed. The table is positioned for someone who can stand and lean over it. You keep having to reach, and your chair's wheels lock when you try to move closer. Whoever arranged this room didn't think about your needs. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Very observant. And suicidal. Do you know what I could do to you for leaving your quarters without permission? I can imagine. I took a step into the room. But you're going to have to punish me anyway for picking the lock. Might as well make it count. For a long moment he just stared at me. Then, incredibly, that harsh laugh returned. You're either very brave or very stupid, Omega. Nova. The correction came automatically. My name is Nova. I know your name. Own you. I know everything about you. He rolled closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. I know your father died of a weak heart 2 years ago. I know your stepmother remarried within 6 months to a merchant who promptly lost his fortune in bad investments. I know she blames your mother for stealing your father's affection, and you for being born at all. He stopped just a foot away, his pale gaze boring into mine. I know you're here because she hates you, and I needed an omega to shut the council up. So don't pretend we're on familiar terms. You're Nova when I choose to use your name. Each word was designed to cut, to remind me of my place. But I heard something underneath it, a man who had memorized the details of his purchase to remind himself that this was a transaction, nothing more. That he didn't have to feel guilty about what he'd done. What happened to your legs? I asked quietly. The change in his expression was instant, a wall slamming down behind his eyes. That's none of your concern. If I'm to be your wife, it seems relevant. You're to be a vessel for an heir. Nothing more. But his hands had tightened on the wheels of his chair, his knuckles white. And it was a curse. A rival alpha, jealous of my conquests. He hired a witch to bind my legs during a battle 3 years ago. One moment I was whole. The next I was. He gestured sharply at his chair. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jump. This. Have you tried to break it? What do you think Victor is for? 5 different healers. 7 different potions and remedies. 2 exorcists. Nothing works. The magic is too old, too deeply rooted. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. Practice. He'd told this story before. I can't walk. I can't stand. I can't fight the way I once did. I'm half a king sitting on a whole throne, and every day my enemies circle closer, waiting for the moment I show weakness enough to strike. The vulnerability in those words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about mobility. This was about identity. About a warrior king reduced to wheels and leather, forced to rely on others for basic movement, always aware that his disability made him a target. You're not half anything, I said before I could stop myself. You're still the Alpha King. Still feared. Still powerful. Your arms are stronger than most men's legs. Your mind sharp enough to rule an entire kingdom from that chair. The curse took your legs, not your crown. He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Spare me the inspirational platitudes, Omega. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not. I moved past him to the scattered papers, kneeling to gather them. But I know you're tearing yourself apart over this, and you don't have to. I glanced at the documents. Reports from border towns, complaints about trade routes, a letter with the royal seal marked urgent. Let me help organize these. You can dictate orders and I'll write them. I have good handwriting. It was the one thing my stepmother found useful about me. I don't need your help. No, you need Adrian or Victor. But they're not here and I am. I stood, placing the papers on the edge of the desk within his reach. And I'm going insane locked in that room with nothing to do but stare at walls and wait to be bred. So let me be useful. Please. The please seemed to surprise him. His expression shifted, calculation replacing some of the anger. If I allow this, it changes nothing about your situation. You're still my captive. Still my future wife. Still here because your stepmother sold you. I know. And if you breathe a word of what you see or hear in this room to anyone, who would I tell? I'm not allowed to speak to anyone but Helena, and she barely acknowledges I exist. I met his gaze steadily. I have no allies here, Your Majesty. No friends. No purpose except to eventually produce your heir. Let me have this. Let me help. It's better than the alternative. Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding maybe, or recognition. He knew about cages. About being trapped. About the slow madness of isolation. Fine, he said finally. But you work here in my sight. And if Adrian finds you, I'll tell him I summoned you. I won't have him thinking you're wandering the palace unsupervised. Agreed. And so it began. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in Mateo's study. Each morning I would pick my lock and slip down the corridor to his private war room. He never acknowledged how I got there and I never asked permission. It became our unspoken arrangement. He pretended to summon me, I pretended to obey. First it was purely functional. I organized his papers, rewrote his dictated orders in clear script, maintained his maps and schedules. He barked commands like I was a scribe, never looking at me directly, never saying more than necessary. But proximity has a way of eroding walls. I learned his patterns. The way he rubbed his left temple when his head ached from too much reading. The way he took his tea dark and bitter, no sugar, just like the coffee he drank at dawn. The way he unconsciously reached for his legs sometimes, as if expecting them to respond, then caught himself with a flash of pain across his features. I learned his mind too. He was brilliant, sharp and strategic, seeing patterns in trade routes and troop movements that would have escaped lesser men. His decisions were calculated, efficient, sometimes ruthless, but never cruel for cruelty's sake. Every harsh choice had a reason, a logic I could follow even when I didn't agree. And slowly, carefully, I began to speak. "The southern border dispute," I said one morning, reviewing a report. "The farmers are complaining about raids, but the northern merchants are reporting surplus grain sales. Someone's moving stolen goods through alternate routes." He glanced up, surprised. "You can read military reports. My father taught me before he died. He believed daughters should be educated." Pointed to the map. "Here. This town. It's positioned between the two regions. I'd investigate there first." Matteo studied the map, then nodded slowly. "Smart." He didn't thank me, but he sent orders to the town that afternoon. Another day, I found him trying to reach a book on a high shelf, his chair positioned awkwardly, his frustration palpable. I retrieved it without comment, placing it on his desk. "I could have called Adrian," he said stiffly. "He's training the new guards. I was here." I returned to my writing. "It's not weakness to accept help, Your Majesty. It's efficiency." His gaze on my back was heavy, considering. The turning point came during a cold evening 2 weeks into our arrangement. I'd been transcribing his correspondence when I noticed his hands trembling slightly. Not from weakness, from pain. "When was the last time you stretched?" I asked quietly. "Excuse me. Your shoulders. Your arms. You use them for everything, moving your chair, lifting, writing. They must ache constantly." I set down the quill. My mother had chronic pain in her hands from weaving. I used to help her with massage and movement. "If you'd allow it, I could." "No." The word was sharp, final. "Your Majesty." I said no, Nova. He'd used my name. That was new. "I don't need you touching me. I don't need your pity." "It's not pity." I held his gaze. "It's practical. You're in pain. Can help. That's all." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. "Fine. But if you try anything. I'm an omega who weighs half what you do, trying to help an alpha king who could snap my neck with one hand. What exactly do you think I'm going to try?" That harsh laugh again, but this time with less edge. "Fair point." I moved behind his chair, my hands hovering over his shoulders. Even through the fabric of his shirt, I could feel the tension coiled there like steel cables. Carefully, I began to work at the knots, using techniques my mother had taught me years ago. He stiffened at first, his entire body going rigid under my touch. But gradually, as I worked in silence, he began to relax. I felt the moment it happened, the exact second his defenses lowered and he allowed himself to simply feel relief. "Better?" I asked after several minutes. "Yes." The admission seemed to cost him. "Thank you." I returned to my seat, picking up the quill as if nothing significant had happened. But something had. We both knew it. That evening, Adrian came to collect me personally. His expression was carefully neutral as always, but as we walked the corridors, he spoke for the first time in 2 weeks beyond single-word commands. "You've been helping him." It wasn't a question. I decided honesty was my only option. "Yes. He seems less volatile, more focused." Adrian's gray eyes studied me with that perpetual assessment. "I wasn't certain you'd survive the first week." I wasn't certain either. The other omegas ran or broke. You've stayed. And somehow, you've made yourself useful. He paused at my door. That's dangerous, you know. Making yourself necessary. Why? Because when you're necessary, you become a target. For his enemies. For anyone who wants to hurt him. Adrian's expression remained neutral, but his voice dropped. And despite everything, I don't think you're here to hurt him. It was the closest thing to approval I'd received from anyone in this fortress. I looked up at him, this stone-faced beta who had dragged me from my stepmother's house like cargo. I'm just trying to survive. So is he. Adrian opened my door. Keep helping him, Omega. But be careful. This palace has eyes everywhere, and not all of them are friendly. As the lock clicked behind me, I touched my mother's medallion through my dress. The metal was warm, alive. I'd earned my first ally. And somehow, impossibly, I'd begun to see the man beneath the king's crown. The question was, what would happen when he started seeing me too? The letter arrived on a gray morning 3 weeks into my captivity, slipped under my door while Helena was checking the corridor. I found it when I woke, a cream envelope sealed with familiar wax. My stepmother's personal seal, a serpent coiled around a rose. My hands shook as I broke it open. My dear Nova, I trust you are settling into your new circumstances. The king's household staff speak highly of your adaptability. How fortunate that you've made yourself useful to His Majesty. I always knew you had a talent for survival, even if you lacked your stepsister's more refined qualities. I write with news that may interest you. The Council of Alphas convenes next month to discuss matters of succession and territorial disputes. There are those who question whether a king who cannot walk can truly defend his throne. Whispers of weakness. Concerns about vulnerability. I've been approached by certain parties interested in ensuring stability during these uncertain times. They believe a transition of power may be necessary. For the good of the kingdom, you understand. As the king's future wife, you are uniquely positioned to observe his daily routines, his security measures, his moments of greatest incapacity. Should you wish to secure a better future for yourself, one not shackled to a crippled king, I could arrange safe passage, protection, perhaps even a reunion with your dear stepsister. Think carefully, Nova. Loyalty to a dying regime is admirable but foolish. The smart survive by knowing when to change sides. Do write back. I'm staying at the Rose and Crown in the capital. We have so much to discuss. Your devoted stepmother, Evangeline. I read it 3 times, each pass making my blood run colder. This wasn't a letter. It was a recruitment trap and an implicit threat. If I didn't cooperate, Evangeline had other ways of getting the information she needed. The spy was already here. Probably had been since before I arrived. My first instinct was to burn the letter, pretend I'd never seen it. My second was to run to Matteo immediately. But I forced myself to think, to be strategic. Evangeline was testing me. If I went to the king with only a vague letter, she could claim innocence, say I'd misunderstood. I needed proof of the conspiracy, evidence of the spy. And I knew exactly where to start looking. That morning I went to Matteo's study as usual. He was already there, reviewing a stack of reports that Adrian had delivered at dawn. He'd grown accustomed to my presence, no longer startling when I entered, sometimes even greeting me with a nod. "You're late," he said without looking up. "By 3 minutes. There was a delay with my guard." I moved to my usual seat, but my mind was racing. Who had access to the king's schedules? Who could move through the palace reporting his routines to outside parties? Your Majesty, who manages the household staff assignments. He glanced up, curious. Victor oversees most of it. Why? Just curious about the palace structure. I picked up the quill, trying to sound casual. How information flows. Who reports to whom? His pale eyes narrowed slightly. That's a strange curiosity for someone who's only concerned with transcribing my letters. I'm locked in this fortress with nothing but time to think. Strange curiosities are all I have. I met his gaze steadily. Humor me. For a moment I thought he'd refuse. Then he rolled closer to the desk, pulling out a ledger. Fine. Victor manages staff. Adrian handles security and military personnel. I oversee the council and political matters. Information flows up through those 3 channels. He tapped the ledger. Every servant, guard, and official is recorded here. Assignments, schedules, clearances. I leaned forward, scanning the names. There, a notation in the margins. Helena transferred from Capital Garrison. Recommended by Council Member Lord Ruthern. The same Lord Ruthern whose signature appeared on several documents questioning the king's fitness to rule. My guard. The woman who stood outside my door, who heard everything, who had access to my routines and by extension, information about when I was with the king. Who reported my adaptability to parties that would report it to Evangeline. What is it? Matteo's voice had gone sharp. You've gone pale. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not without more proof. Nothing. Just remembering something my stepmother used to say about palace politics. I forced myself to return to the transcription work, but my hands were unsteady. That evening I did something reckless. When Helena escorted me back to my quarters, I accidentally dropped my mother's medallion as we reached the door. It clattered across the stone floor, rolling toward Helena's feet. How clumsy, I said, moving to retrieve it. As I bent down, I let my hand brush against the satchel at her belt, the one she carried everywhere. My fingers found the edge of a folded paper inside. Helena's hand clamped around my wrist like a vice. Careful, Omega. Sorry. I pulled back, medallion clutched in my hand, heart hammering. But I'd felt what I needed to feel. Papers. Multiple ones. Reports, probably. Evidence. As soon as my door locked behind me, I began planning. I needed to get those papers. I needed proof before Helena could destroy it or before Evangeline's conspiracy moved forward. And I needed to do it without getting killed in the process. The opportunity came 2 nights later. A commotion in the East Wing. Shouting, the sound of guards running. Helena left her post to investigate, her hand on her weapon. I counted to 10, then picked my lock and slipped into the corridor. Her station was just outside my door. A small alcove with a chair and a narrow table. And there, carelessly set aside in her haste, was her satchel. I rifled through it with shaking hands. Papers. Letters. And there, correspondence with a capital address. The Rose and Crown. Reports about the king's daily schedule. His moments alone in his study. The times when Adrian was occupied with training. Intelligence that could only be used for one purpose. Assassination or coup. I was folding the papers into my dress when I heard footsteps returning. Rest. I barely made it back to my room. Door closed and locked from the inside, before Helena's shadow appeared in the gap beneath the door. My heart was trying to beat out of my chest. I had the evidence. Now I needed to survive long enough to deliver it. The next morning, Helena was different. Her usual stone-faced indifference had been replaced with something sharper. Watchful. When she escorted me to the study, her hand never left her dagger. She knew. Somehow, she knew I'd taken the papers. Matteo noticed immediately. Why is your guard inside the room? His Majesty's safety, Helena said smoothly, positioning herself by the door. There have been concerns about security. I'm to remain with the Omega at all times. I don't recall authorizing that change. Matteo's voice had gone cold. Who gave the order? Lord Ruthern, Your Majesty. As head of the Security Council. The Security Council reports to me through Adrian, not the other way around. He turned to me, and I saw the question in his eyes. Something's wrong. Nova, are you well? You look frightened. This was it. The moment I had to choose. Stay silent and possibly die. Or trust the man who'd bought me like property but who'd also allowed me to work beside him, who'd accepted my help, who'd let his walls down enough to laugh in my presence. I pulled the papers from my dress and placed them on the desk. Your Majesty, I need to tell you about a letter I received. And about the treason being planned against you. Helena moved. Yes. Her dagger was out and at my throat before I could blink. Her arm locked around my body. Don't move, Your Majesty. I will kill her. Matteo's expression went from shock to rage in a heartbeat. Release her. Now. I'm afraid I can't do that. Helena's voice was calm, professional. This Omega has stolen sensitive documents and made serious accusations. I'm authorized to neutralize threats to kingdom security. You're authorized to protect, not assassinate without trial. His hands were on his wheels, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was too far away. By the time he reached us, she could cut my throat. What is this about, Helena? Speak plainly. It's about a crippled king who can't defend his throne. About a kingdom that needs strong leadership before it falls to outside threats. The blade pressed harder against my skin. I felt a warm trickle of blood. Lord Ruthern and his allies will provide that leadership. Peacefully if you abdicate. Less peacefully if you don't. A coup. Matteo's voice was deadly quiet. You're part of a coup. I'm part of progress. And this Omega. She shook me hard enough to rattle my teeth. Should have stayed in her room and kept her mouth shut. Now she's a liability. Everything happened at once. Matteo moved. His arms propelling his chair forward with shocking speed. I dropped my full weight down, breaking Helena's grip enough to twist. Her blade sliced my shoulder instead of my throat. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, but I was free. I rolled, grabbed the nearest heavy object, a brass inkwell, and hurled it at her head. A hit. She stumbled. And Matteo was there. His powerful arm striking out to catch her wrist, twisting until the dagger clattered to the floor. He might not be able to use his legs, but his upper body strength was brutal, efficient. He had her arm bent at a painful angle, his other hand at her throat. Adrian! His roar shook the room. Guards! The door burst open. Adrian and 4 guards poured in, weapons drawn. They took in the scene instantly. Me bleeding on the floor, Helena restrained by the king, papers scattered everywhere. Arrest her, Matteo commanded. Take her to the cells. Send word to Lord Ruthern that his spy has been compromised and he's next. He released Helena into the guard's custody, his pale eyes blazing with fury. And someone get Victor. Now. As the guards dragged Helena away, she was silent now, defeated. Adrian knelt beside me. His usually neutral expression showed actual concern. You're bleeding badly. I'm fine. The lie was obvious. My shoulder was on fire, blood soaking through my dress. But I looked past Adrian to Matteo. The papers. Read them. It's all there. My stepmother is part of it. She tried to recruit me. Matteo rolled closer, his gaze dropping to my wound. Something flickered across his face. Anger, yes, but something else. Something that looked almost like fear. You could have died. She could have killed you before I reached her. But she didn't. I tried to smile, though my vision was starting to blur. And now you have your proof. Now you can stop them. Why? The question was quiet, intense. Why risk yourself? Why not just show me the letter and let me handle it? Because I needed proof. Because a vague accusation would have gotten me nowhere. I met his eyes, willing him to understand. Because despite everything, despite being sold and collared and treated like property, I don't want to see you hurt. You're not what they say you are. Not weak. Not vulnerable. Not half a king. My voice was fading. You're just a man who deserved better than a curse and a kingdom full of traitors. Victor burst through the door, his physician's bag already open. He took one look at my shoulder and cursed. Lay her down. Carefully. Strong hands, Matteo's hands, caught me as I swayed. He lifted me with ease, settling me on the long couch against the wall. His face was very close to mine, his pale eyes searching my features. "You defended me," he said softly, almost wonderingly. "You chose me over your stepmother's offer. Over safety. There's no safety with Evangeline. Only servitude of a different kind." I tried to focus on his face, but the room was tilting. "At least here. At least with you. Could be useful. I could matter. You matter." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "You hear me, Nova? You matter. Not as an omega. Not as a broodmare. As..." He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "As someone I don't want to lose." Victor was working on my shoulder, his hands efficient and surprisingly gentle. "The wound isn't fatal, but she's lost blood. She needs rest and monitoring." He glanced at Matteo with an odd expression. "Your Majesty, there's something you should know. Something I've been researching about your curse." "Not now, Victor." "No, now. It's relevant." Victor tied off the bandage and sat back. "The curse on your legs, it's not just binding magic. It's a blood curse. Specifically, it requires a willing bond with an omega's healing aura to break. Not force. Not obligation. Genuine connection. Partnership." He paused, letting that sink in. "The witch who cast it designed it that way deliberately. To ensure you'd be isolated, unable to form the very bond that could free you." Matteo stared at him. "You're saying..." "I'm saying this omega, whose resilience and aura I noted in my initial examination, may be the key to breaking your curse. But only if the bond between you is real. Only if she chooses it freely." Victor looked at me, then back at the king. "And she just proved she'd die for you. That seems fairly genuine." The room went very quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, rapid and unsteady. Could feel Matteo's hand still holding my uninjured arm, his grip gentle now, almost protective. "Nova." He said my name like a prayer, like a question. "Would you, if I asked, would you stand with me? Not as property. Not as an obligation. But as my queen. My partner. My mate." The word mate sent a shock through my omega biology. My instincts recognized what my mind was still processing. This powerful alpha, asking for my choice. Offering me not servitude but sovereignty. "I would," I whispered. "I will." Something shifted in his expression. The walls I'd spent weeks trying to see past crumbled entirely. He leaned down, his forehead touching mine, and I felt it. The beginning of a bond, fragile and new but unmistakably real. His scent wrapped around me, pine and steel and something uniquely him, and my omega nature sang in response. "Then you're mine," he said roughly. "Not because I bought you. 'Cause you chose me. And I choose you." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "We'll announce it tonight. Before Ruthern can regroup. You'll be presented as my queen, my mate, my equal. Let them try to move against a bonded pair." "Your Majesty," Adrian said quietly from the doorway. "The other conspirators? Arrest them all. Starting with Ruthern and anyone connected to him." Matteo's voice had gone hard, commanding. The king reasserting himself. But his hand remained gentle on my arm. "Send riders to the capital. Find Evangeline. Bring her here in chains. She answers for this. For all of it." "And the omega?" Victor asked, packing his supplies. "She needs rest. She stays here. In my quarters. Under my protection." Matteo looked down at me, and in his pale eyes I saw something I'd never expected to find in this cold fortress. Warmth. "No more locked doors, Nova. No more guards watching your every move. You're my queen now. This palace is as much yours as mine." As consciousness began to slip away, pulled under by blood loss and exhaustion, I felt his hand tighten around mine. Felt the bond between us pulse with new strength. Heard him murmur something that sounded like a promise. I'd been sold to the disabled Alpha King as revenge and profit. But I'd chosen to become his queen. And somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen me back. I woke 3 days later to find the palace in lockdown and Matteo beside my bed. His hand wrapped around mine. His face drawn with exhaustion. He hadn't slept. I could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the tightness around his mouth. "You're awake." Relief flooded his features. "Victor said you'd wake today, but I wasn't certain." "What happened?" My shoulder throbbed, but the pain was manageable. "Healing." "How long was I unconscious?" 3 days. "Victor kept you sedated while your body recovered from the blood loss." He squeezed my hand gently. "The coup attempt has been partially contained. We've arrested 15 conspirators, including Lord Ruthern. But Evangeline..." His jaw clenched. "She disappeared. Our riders found the rose and crown abandoned. She knew we were coming." I pushed myself upright despite the protest from my shoulder. "She's planning something. She wouldn't just run. That's not her way." "I know." Matteo's pale eyes met mine. "Adrian has doubled the guard. Victor's implementing new security protocols. But there's something else." He hesitated, and I saw uncertainty flicker across his features. Rare for him. "Victor believes the bond between us is strong enough now to attempt breaking the curse. The ritual requires a full moon, which happens tomorrow night. But it will leave me vulnerable for several hours. Completely incapacitated while the magic works." My blood went cold. "That's when she'll strike." "Likely. Which is why Adrian wants to postpone." "No." I cut him off, my voice firm. "We do it tomorrow. We have to. Every day you remain cursed is another day your enemies can call you weak. Another day they can plot against you." I shifted to face him fully, ignoring the pull on my stitches. "We prepare for her attack. We set the trap. And we end this." Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. "My queen," he said softly, and the title was a caress. "Always so ready to charge into battle. I learned from my king." I touched his face, feeling the rough stubble there, the warmth of his skin. The bond between us hummed with life, with connection. "Tell me everything. What does the ritual require?" The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. Victor walked me through the ritual. Ancient magic that would require me to channel my omega healing aura directly into Matteo's body, burning away the curse from the inside. It would take hours and leave us both defenseless. I would be consumed with maintaining the flow of healing energy. Matteo would be paralyzed completely, his body vulnerable while the magic did its work. "You'll both be targets," Adrian said bluntly during our war council. He'd spread maps across Matteo's desk, marking guard positions and potential breach points. "If Evangeline has any intelligence at all, and we know she does, she'll know this is her moment." The king incapacitated. You focused on the ritual. It's the perfect opportunity for assassination. Then we make it the perfect trap instead. I pointed to the ritual chamber Victor had selected, a fortified room in the palace's oldest wing, with only 2 entrances. "We announce the ritual publicly. Let the information leak. Make it obvious where we'll be and when." Matteo's eyebrow rose. "You want to use ourselves as bait. I want to draw her out. Force her to commit everything she has to this one assault." I looked at Adrian. "Can you defend 2 entrances with absolute certainty?" "If I position our most loyal guards and set proper traps, yes. But if they breach the room?" "They won't." I met his gray eyes steadily. "Because you're the best beta in this kingdom, and you've spent 3 years protecting a king everyone said was vulnerable. You know how to defend against impossible odds." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. "Respect maybe. Or recognition. You've changed since you arrived, Omega. You're thinking like a queen. I'm thinking like someone who refuses to lose the people I care about." I turned back to the maps. "Show me the guard positions. I want to understand every angle of defense." We worked through the night, planning contingencies and backup plans. Matteo watched me coordinate with Adrian, saw me question strategies and suggest alternatives, and I could feel his pride through our bond like sunshine on skin. This was partnership. This was what Victor had meant about genuine connection. Not just romantic love but respect, trust, equality. As dawn broke, Matteo pulled me aside. His hands cupped my face, his pale eyes searching mine. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know something. His voice was rough with emotion. These weeks with you have been the first time since the curse that I've felt whole. Not because you fixed me or healed me. 'Cause you saw me. The man, not the disability. Not the crown. Just me. He leaned his forehead against mine. Whatever happens tonight, thank you for that. Don't thank me yet. I kissed him softly, feeling the bond between us pulse with strength. Thank me when we're both alive tomorrow and you can walk again. The ritual chamber was exactly as foreboding as I'd expected. Ancient stone walls covered in runes. 2 heavy doors reinforced with iron. A circular pattern carved into the floor where Matteo would lie. Candles positioned at precise points around the perimeter. It looked like a place where old magic still lived in the stones. Victor had prepared everything with meticulous care. The moment you begin channeling your aura, you won't be able to stop, he warned me. If you break the connection before the curse is fully burned out, it could kill him. And you'll be aware of everything happening around you, but unable to respond. Your entire being will be focused on the healing. I understand. Nova. Victor's expression was unusually serious behind his spectacles. This will hurt. For both of you. The curse won't release without a fight. You'll feel his pain as if it's your own. Are you certain? I'm certain. I looked at Matteo, who was being positioned in the center of the circle by Adrian. Even now, his presence commanded the room. I'm ready. Adrian checked his weapons one final time. Guards are in position. Every loyal man we have is stationed between here and the outside world. If Evangeline comes, she'll have to go through them first. She will come, I said quietly. I know her. This is exactly the kind of move she'd make. Dramatic. Final. Then let her come. Matteo's voice was steady, calm. The voice of a king who'd faced death before and wasn't afraid. Let's end this tonight. The ritual began at moonrise. I knelt beside Matteo, my hands placed over his heart as Victor had instructed. The moment I opened myself to the Omega healing aura, that deep ancient power that lived in my blood, I felt it surge through me like wildfire. Golden light spilled from my hands, sinking into Matteo's chest, racing through his body toward the dark curse that wrapped around his spine like chains. He screamed. The sound tore through me, echoed through our bond, and I felt his agony as if it were my own. The curse fought back, black magic clashing against healing light, and the battle raged inside his body. I could feel every nerve, every muscle, every cell as the curse burned away and tried to reform. Tried to hold on. I poured more power into him. More light. More healing. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. We survive what would shatter others. Time became meaningless. Minutes or hours passed. Victor stood watch, monitoring us both. Adrian had positioned himself at the door, his hand on his sword, and I channeled everything I had into breaking the curse that had stolen Matteo's legs. Then I heard it. Distant but growing closer, the sound of combat. Steel on steel. Shouting. Adrian's head snapped up. They're here. His voice was ice-cold, battle-ready. Multiple attackers. Professional fighters. He drew his sword. Victor, seal the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me. Adrian, wait. Victor started, but the beta was already gone, the door slamming shut behind him. I couldn't stop. Couldn't break the connection. Could only kneel there channeling healing light while the sounds of fighting grew louder, closer. Matteo's body convulsed under my hands, the curse giving one final, desperate surge of resistance. Hold on, I thought desperately at him through our bond. Just hold on. The sounds of combat reached the door. I heard Adrian's voice, sharp and commanding, heard the clash of weapons. Heard a woman's scream of rage that I would recognize anywhere. Evangeline. Open this door. Her voice was shrill with fury. Open it or I'll kill every guard in this hallway. You'll have to go through me first, Adrian snarled. More fighting. More screaming. The curse inside Matteo suddenly released, like chains snapping all at once. I felt the moment it happened, the black magic shattering under the weight of healing light, dissolving into nothing. His legs jerked. Once. Sensation returning after 3 years of nothing. But I couldn't stop channeling. Not yet. Had to make sure every trace of the curse was burned away, that it couldn't reform. Had to keep pouring light into his body until the door exploded inward. Not the door Adrian was defending. The other one. The one we'd thought was too reinforced to breach. Evangeline stood in the gap, her dress torn and bloody, a wickedly curved blade in her hand. Behind her, 3 men in dark armor. Professional assassins, the kind you hired when you wanted a king dead. Hello, Nova. Her smile was poisonous. Did you really think your pathetic beta could stop me? I've been planning this for years. Every contingency. Every angle. She stepped into the room, her assassins fanning out behind her. And now I find you helpless. Unable to fight. Unable to run. Just kneeling there like the weak little omega you've always been. I couldn't respond. Couldn't move. Could only keep channeling, feeling Matteo's body healing beneath my hands, knowing that if I stopped now it would all be for nothing. Evangeline moved closer, her blade catching the candlelight. Your mother stole everything from me, you know. Your father's love. His attention. His fortune. She made me second choice, always second. And then she had you, perfect, innocent Nova, while my own daughter had to fight for scraps of affection. She was almost at the circle now. So I took it all back. Sold you like the commodity you are. Used you to buy access to a dying king. And now I'll finish what I started. Kill you both. Let Ruthern's faction take the throne. Finally get everything I deserve. The assassins raised their weapons. Evangeline lifted her blade, aiming for my throat. And something inside me snapped. The healing aura I'd been carefully channeling suddenly exploded outward. Not just into Matteo but into the entire room. Golden light blazed like a sun, bright enough to blind. The assassins stumbled back, screaming. Evangeline threw up her arm to shield her eyes. I felt Matteo's hand close around mine. Felt him surge upwards, actually standing on legs that worked, that responded, that held his weight after 3 years of paralysis. His other hand caught Evangeline's wrist, twisting the blade away with brutal efficiency. You made a mistake, he growled, his voice dark with rage. You should have killed her quickly. Instead, you gave her time to finish healing me. Evangeline's eyes went wide with horror. No. That's not, you can't. I can. He threw her backward into her own assassins, sending them sprawling. And now you'll answer for everything. Treason. The attempted assassination. The abuse of the woman who is now my mate and queen. The door Adrian had been defending burst open. The beta rushed in, bloodied but alive, more guards behind him. They took in the scene instantly. Matteo standing tall, me still kneeling but the ritual clearly complete, Evangeline and her assassins trapped between them. Arrest them, Matteo commanded. All of them. They'll stand trial for treason and attempted regicide. As the guards moved forward, Evangeline's gaze locked on mine. All the hatred, all the venom she'd carried for years, focused into one final glare. You think you've won. You think marrying a crippled king makes you special? You're still nothing. Still the unwanted daughter. Still alive. I stood, my legs shaky but strong. The healing light had faded, but I could feel its warmth still glowing inside me. Still standing. Still here. While you're the one in chains. I moved to Matteo's side, felt his arm come around me, steadying me. I was never nothing, Evangeline. You just needed me to believe I was. But I don't. Not anymore. The guards dragged her away, still screaming curses and threats. The assassins went quietly, professional to the end. Adrian secured the room, checking for other threats. And Matteo turned to me, his pale eyes bright with emotion. You did it. You broke the curse. We did it. I leaned against him, exhausted beyond measure. Together. He kissed me then, deep and claiming, and I felt the bond between us solidify into something unbreakable. Mate bond. True bond. The kind that couldn't be forced or faked. Victor appeared in the doorway, his expression caught between professional assessment and genuine amazement. Your Majesty. You're standing. I'm standing. Matteo's voice held wonder. After 3 years I'm standing. He looked down at me. Because of her. Because of both of you, Victor corrected. The bond made it possible. The genuine connection, the trust, the choice. He adjusted his spectacles. Though I must say, using your healing aura as a weapon was improvised. Brilliant, but improvised. I didn't know I could do that, I admitted. I just knew I had to protect him. Had to stop her. And the power just responded. Omega auras are defensive by nature, Victor said. When threatened, they can manifest in unexpected ways. You protected your mate. The power recognized that and gave you what you needed. Adrian approached, wiping blood from his sword. The traitors are secured. Palace is safe. And our king stands whole again. He looked at me and for the first time I saw him truly smile. Well fought, my queen. You've earned your crown tonight. Through blood and pain and impossible choices, I transformed from sold property into sovereign queen. Had helped break an ancient curse. Had defended the kingdom against treasonous plots. Had fought for the man I loved with every ounce of power I possessed. And as Matteo held me close, his legs finally whole beneath him, our bond singing with life and promise, I knew this was only the beginning. We had survived the storm. Now we would rebuild the kingdom together. The trial of Evangeline Thorne lasted 3 days and drew nobles from across the kingdom. They came to witness the fall of a traitor, but they stayed to witness the rise of a queen. I sat beside Matteo on a throne that had been brought to match his. Equal height, equal placement, equal authority. My shoulder had healed, leaving only a thin silver scar that I wore like a badge of honor. The formal coronation would come later, but this was my true claiming. Not through ceremony, but through the respect I'd earned in blood and sacrifice. Evangeline stood in chains before us, her elegant facade finally cracked. 3 days of testimony had revealed the full scope of her conspiracy. Bribes paid, loyalties bought, assassination attempts planned. Lord Ruthern had broken under questioning, naming every conspirator, every plot. The web of treason had been vast, but it was unraveling now, thread by thread. Evangeline Thorne, Matteo's voice rang through the throne room, cold and absolute. You stand convicted of high treason, conspiracy to commit regicide, and the attempted murder of the Queen. The council has deliberated. Have you anything to say before sentence is passed? For a moment I thought she would stay silent. Then her gaze found mine, and something ugly twisted in her expression. I should have drowned you when you were born, she hissed. Should have ended your mother's legacy before it could poison everything. But I was too merciful, too patient. I thought selling you would be enough, that watching you suffer would satisfy the debt. Her laugh was brittle, broken. Instead, you became everything I tried to destroy. Queen. A mate to a king. Everything that should have been Celeste's. Celeste is welcome at court, I said quietly, my first words since the trial began. I've extended the invitation personally. Your daughter is not responsible for your crimes, and I will not punish her for your sins. I leaned forward slightly. Unlike you, I don't believe children are commodities to be used for revenge. Evangeline's face went purple with rage, but the guards held her firm. Matteo's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. Evangeline Thorne, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment in the southern fortress. Your titles are stripped. Your properties seized. You will live out your days in isolation, with time to reflect on the consequences of your choices. He paused, his pale eyes hard as winter ice. And you will know that the woman you tried to destroy now rules the kingdom you sought to tear apart. As the guards dragged her away, still screaming, still cursing, I felt no triumph. Only a weary relief that it was finally over. The woman who had sold me was gone. The threat to our kingdom neutralized. The debts of the past finally settled. Are you well? Matteo asked quietly as the throne room began to empty. I will be. I squeezed his hand. It's strange. I thought I'd feel more when this moment came. Vindication maybe. Or satisfaction. But I just feel free. That's because you were never defined by her hatred. He pulled me to my feet. Such a simple gesture, but one that still made my heart lift. Watching him stand, walk, move through the world on his own legs was a joy that hadn't faded. You defined yourself. Through courage and intelligence and a stubborn refusal to break. I learned from you. I touched his face, feeling the warmth there. You showed me what it meant to survive impossible circumstances with dignity intact. We taught each other. He kissed me softly. Now come. There's something I want to show you. He led me through the palace, Adrian falling into step behind us with Victor close after. Over the past weeks, these two had become more than advisors or guards. They'd become friends, family even. The four of us had faced death together and emerged stronger. We climbed to the highest tower, a place I'd never been permitted before. The stairs were long and winding, but Matteo took them easily, his strength returning more each day. At the top, a door opened onto a balcony overlooking the entire kingdom. The view stole my breath. Mountains in the distance, forests spreading like dark carpet below, and the sea stretching endless to the horizon. The storm clouds that had hung over the palace since my arrival had finally cleared, revealing sky the color of sapphires. This is where I came, Matteo said quietly, when the curse first took hold, when I needed to remember why I was fighting, what I was fighting for. He gestured at the landscape below. All of this. Every person in those towns and villages. Every family depending on their king to protect them. His arm came around my waist. I couldn't let the curse beat me. Couldn't let my enemies see weakness. So I fought. Every day. Even when it seemed hopeless. It was never hopeless, I said. You were never weak. The curse was just waiting for the right person to break it. The right omega. He turned me to face him, his pale eyes intense. The right woman. The right mate. From his pocket, he drew something small and gleaming. A crown, delicate and beautiful, worked in silver with moonstones that caught the light. This belonged to my mother. She wore it as queen. And I want you to wear it now. Not because protocol demands it. Not because the council expects it. But because you've earned it 1,000 times over. He placed it on my head, and I felt the weight of it. Light physically, but heavy with meaning. With responsibility. With promise. You came here as property, Matteo said. His voice rough with emotion. Sold for silver, collared like an animal. Given no choice in your fate. I was part of that. Bought you. Used you. Treated you as a solution to my problems rather than a person. His hands cupped my face. And somehow, despite all of that, you saw past the transaction to something real. You chose me when you had every reason to choose freedom instead. Freedom with you, I corrected. Not from you. That's what I chose. And I choose you. Every day. For the rest of my life. He kissed me deeply, and the bond between us flared bright and strong. My mate. My queen. My salvation. Behind us, Adrian cleared his throat. The council awaits, your majesties. The formal announcements need to be made. Let them wait. Matteo's smile was wicked. For the first time in 3 years, I can walk into that chamber on my own legs with my mate by my side. They can be patient. Victor adjusted his spectacles. His clinical expression softening into something almost fond. The healing continues to progress remarkably. Your mobility is now at 90% of pre-curse levels. Another month, and you'll be back to full strength. Thanks to Nova. Matteo pulled me close. Everything I am now is thanks to her. We healed each other, I said firmly. You gave me purpose when I had none. Respect when I'd never known it. A place to belong when I'd been cast out. I looked at Adrian and Victor, these men who'd become brothers in arms. All of you did. You made me part of something greater than myself. You made yourself part of it, Adrian said, his gray eyes warm. We just had the good sense to recognize what you were offering. He bowed, formal and respectful. It's an honor to serve you, my queen. The honor is mine, Adrian. I returned his bow. You saved my life more times than I can count. And you saved the king's. I'd say we're even. Victor approached, holding a small velvet box. Speaking of which, I had this commissioned when the curse broke. A gift of sorts. He opened the box to reveal a pendant identical to my mother's omega medallion, but worked in matching silver to my crown. The crescent moon embracing a star. Your mother's wisdom carried you through darkness. This is so you'll always remember where you came from, even as you step into where you're going. My throat tightened with emotion. Victor. Thank you. Thank you, he corrected, for showing me that healing is more than medicine. It's connection, love, partnership. He glanced at Matteo. You saved him in ways I never could. As Victor fastened the pendant around my neck, I felt my mother's presence like a warm embrace. Some people break, Libby. Others bend until they become unbreakable. I hadn't broken. I'd bent, survived, transformed. The four of us stood on that tower balcony, looking out over a kingdom that had been saved through unity and trust. A disabled king who'd learned to accept help. An omega who'd learned her own strength. A beta who'd learned that loyalty meant supporting, not just protecting. A physician who'd learned that healing came in many forms. Your Majesties, Adrian said again, more gently this time. The kingdom awaits. Then let's not keep them waiting. Matteo took my hand, his grip strong and sure. Ready, my queen. I looked at the crown on my head, felt the pendant against my heart, saw the bond between us glowing bright and true. I'd been sold for 30 pieces of silver as my stepmother's revenge. But I'd become something far greater, a queen who'd earned her throne through courage and sacrifice. A mate who'd broken an ancient curse through love and healing. A woman who'd transformed forced servitude into chosen sovereignty. I'm ready, I said. Let's show them what we've built. And together, king and queen, alpha and omega, two souls bonded by choice rather than chains, we descended to claim our kingdom. The girl who'd been sold had become the queen who would never be bought. And that made all the difference. Thank you for joining the pack today. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and tap the moon bell so you never miss the next Alpha Destiny. And tell me in the comments, who should we follow next under the full moon?